of February 2nd. Present we have Johan Bergstrom, Alexis Compiler, Rod Bragg, Michael Dawson, Hans Christian Flatten, Miles Boris, Rich Stropp, in observing capacity from the testing working group. Okay, we can start with a quick stand-up. Johan, you want to go first?
Sure. As always, poorly prepared here, but I've been doing a few things, less than usual, but I've been working with Michael on, we've been having some issues with the deployments we've had at the OSU OSL lab regarding the PPC cluster. I still think we have issues, so for those of you that have access to the dashboard, don't do any reboots or redeployments from there. You have to either do it through the CLI or log into the server itself and reboot. At least they're gotten more stable, but it's still kind of a, yeah, I'm not very satisfied with the current solution. Hopefully it'll improve. I've also done a bit of work with Jenkins. I guess the biggest one is an issue about purging older jobs. Roughly, I'd say 3 weeks, a month ago, we started seeing Jenkins slowdowns again, and I managed to just reduce it to being like running out of old stack size, which is usually a result of too much to eat for a Java process. So I did some testing and came to the conclusion that it's likely due to having too many build files and job logs in, read by Jenkins. So suggestion was to reduce the amount of open or job history to a month or 30 days to be exact. So last week I played around with a plugin that was supposed to purge as part of the post task of Jenkins for a job. It didn't work at all, or it probably does, but I tried a few combinations and it was just too brittle. I didn't really understand why it chose to keep a few jobs and just delete everything else. So I just resorted to working on disk instead. Jenkins is pretty consistent with how it serializes information. So if you delete things on disk, you can just reload all files, and it actually just works, kind of. So I've deleted roughly 75 gigs from the slave after backing it up, and the results are pretty much instantaneous after it rebuilt the indexes for each job type. I've also done some work with Joao with regards to the timeouts we've been seeing for especially Windows machines. I think we did some, we have had some insights with regards to the ping interval. So it's lowered from 5 minutes to 2 minutes, but the recovery time, which means how long Jenkins needs a response within, is still at 240 seconds, which means that we can send 2 pings and we need 1 back. We might do some more tweaking with it, but it seems much improved.
The problem is solved, right?
I'm not sure. It's too early to say, but it's better. And together with what Hans will be talking about later, we'll probably see a much better situation. Another very important thing I've been starting working with is the backup situation. Here I've pretty much done like an outline in terms of what I think we should be doing, which is pretty much using rsync and a tool called rsnapshot, which is pretty much a small Perl wrapper that helps us snapshot dailies and weeklies and monthlies of information. So there's an issue about that in our issues somewhere. I think it's number, hang on, 308. It'd be good if everyone just had a read or added an opinion if you think otherwise. My plan is to try and get something going within a week where we rotate most of the stuff, but things like all release archives will stay intact and never be rotated, just kept forever. And I guess part of that was the job purging, because there was just too much information to store unnecessarily. There's still some work to be done there, but it's shaping up pretty well. I think I've done a few 2 or 3 redeployments as well to balance deployments. We got a green light from IBM/SoftLayer with regards to having a bit more room at SoftLayer, so I spun up a few more CentOS slaves, since those seems to be the most used. So we had better redundancy there for jobs. That's it.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of stuff. I'm next on the stand-up. I really didn't do much that I can think of related to build. Kind of moving my efforts to other areas, especially now that Joao is doing such a great job with build. We did add visual C++ tools in CI. That's a new recommended compiler SKU for building native modules. And so we added it in CI to build Node with it. So that's it for me. Rod?
Yeah, look, I don't have much to report for build specifically. Mainly been concerned with security updates and foundation level stuff. So really, that's it for me. So who's next?
Rod, I think you did some work with regards to 0.10 and 0.12 releases, which was on the build issues as well.
That's right. I did the XZ compression for 0.10 and 0.12, and someone fixed the headers problem we had in 0.10, 0.12, which was good. So the next 0.10, 0.12 releases will have headers that Node.js can use properly. So we'll go and hardwire in some version numbers to Node.js after this release, and that'll eventually make it out into NPM, and people will eventually be using just header files for Node.js source builds. And the XZ compression is just a nice to have, and NVM will apparently use that as well. So that's nice, but that'll be another hardwired thing only from the next versions of 0.10, 0.12. I'm at the moment I'm resisting going back and putting XZ compression files on older releases, just because there's no SHA-SUMs for it. Sorry, there's no signed SHA-SUMs for it. We can't re-sign those old ones. So I think my inclination is just to leave it as it is, just have it from these next versions.
Cool.
Well, Hans, since you spoke up, you're next.
Yeah, since last time I've been working on the Jenkins monitor. Sorry for a lot of noise to signal radio, guys. But it's should be much better now. It checks more often, and you need 3 downtimes in a row before it sends an alert. So it will take, with the current configuration, it would take 15 minutes before a offline node is reported. So, but that's an increase since the previous version, which only checked once an hour. So please, if there are any incorrect reports, or either false positive or false negative, please just send them to me and I'll look into it.
That's great. Next, Michael Dawson.
Okay, I've been working on a couple things. One is to get jobs that do the V8 testing in the node tree in place. So I've got a job running on x86 that does that, just waiting on the PR to be pulled in, at which point I'll look at running them on a few other platforms. It does require SVN to be installed, so I think I'll put together a PR that adds that to our Ansible configurations. I also spent some time looking at PPCB big endian to see if we could use a different platform for the releases. I had set it up to use Fedora for the regular testing that's taking place now, but we wanted something that's more stable. Unfortunately, when I looked at Ubuntu 14 and even Debian, the Debian flavors, they seem to be missing some of the defines, the __ PPC64 define that's used both in Node and some of the dependencies. So I've got one of the guys in our PPC team chasing that down to figure out what we need to do on that front. And just last week on Friday, got a machine, basically a temporary AX machine until we get more hardware into the OSU OSL. But it's one that I can hook up, and I've been working to hook it up to the CI so that we can start to do AIX runs there as well. I think that's most of what I've been working on. Not sure who's next.
Alex, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I don't really have a whole lot to report. I'm continuing to do some more refactoring on Canary in the Goldmine, but it doesn't really affect the rest of the build group. I think I'm going to try getting SmartOS running on it again and possibly CentOS. There was some challenges we were having with that before. But yeah, I don't think that will really affect many other people's lives in the build group for now.
Okay. Rich Trop?
Hi, I've been playing whack-a-mole with tests for the most part. I feel like I've been doing some other things on the relevant to this group, but I cannot think of them right now because I'm as unprepared as Johan.
Okay. What about Ryan Graham?
I've got nothing to report, unfortunately.
Okay, so I believe that's all for the stand-up. So the first issue on the agenda is issue 75, Alpine Linux / Docker build. Who wants to summarize this issue?
This was discussed last meeting as well, so it might just be left over from there. I was supposed to take point, but I haven't been able to do that. I have been talking with William from the Docker working group, who is also looking into this. But I think the next step is setting up Ansible configuration for Docker.
Okay, do we have a VM provider where we can run Alpine? I see the last comment by Johan says we lack a VM provider.
We'll run it inside a Docker container, so we just need a host with Docker engine running.
Okay, so the Ansible scripts are really the last part missing.
Yes.
Will we run Jenkins inside of the Docker container, or each individual run inside the Docker container?
Oh, good question. I was thinking about each individual run.
I know William, we were talking, I added the other issue, which is slightly related to this, 21, and he's built a tool called Dante. So this is William at NodeSource, Retro Hacker is his username at GitHub, and I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I think it has a lot of automated stuff for running things within it. But it'd be really great to get Alpine building for us, because I think that's really the way forward for a much leaner Node.js deployment in Docker. So it'd be good to get that visibility in.
I guess since we have different jobs for different platforms, we just make a new job for Alpine that and put all the Jenkins stuff in Jenkins to start Docker and run Docker and for each job. Is that the way to go with this? Basically load up Jenkins with all the Docker specific stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to do it, I'd probably do something like that. Just create a state in Alpine where we have the compiler toolchain and just like spin it up and run Jenkins within it and just spin it up down or something. I haven't looked that much at the tool that William suggested, so I mean, it's probably better left with him and with Hans. So.
Yeah, from what I understand, it uses Docker underneath, so it needs to be able to spin up a Docker container for to do its work.
I guess also this brings up questions about which tag of Alpine Linux is built against. Will it always build against latest, and will that cause instability with our testing, or do we build against a particular tag and add additional tags or change that tag over time? That's probably a question for more for the Docker group, but I guess we want to ensure that there is some stability and predictability for users of the test infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Like if for example, if the Alpine container changes versions between two identical runs of the same thing, and it fails on the newer one, that's going to be difficult to grok for people using it.
Yes. I can at least I can look into the Alpine versioning as well.
So what do we need? Do we need to provision a machine for this for you to start experimenting with it, or what do we need?
Yes, I think that's. Would that be done through the Ansible configuration, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's even like CoreOS images available on most providers. If you would want to work with that, I mean it has everything baked, if I recall.
Yes.
So it's pretty much up to what you prefer. Otherwise, we can just do a Ubuntu or Debian thing and install Docker through Ansible.
If the way to go with the Ansible stuff is if you want to do the Ansible stuff up front before we provision a machine, that's fine. The alternative way to do it is to provision a machine and you just set it up and then write the Ansible configuration based on that, and then we just reset the machine and you run it again. That's how I do the Ansible stuff. I mean, it's a little bit hacky, but I find that the optimal workflow. But it's up to you really how you want to do it. I think the best way to go is for you to just use us as a resource in Node Build on IRC to get the machine provisioned that you want, to get it rebuilt whenever you want, and get this working.
Cool. Okay, so let's get a machine and I'll set it up and write a configuration for it.
Okay. Just ping us on IRC or whatever to start an issue with what you'd like, and we can set it up.
Cool.
Sounds like a good plan. Should we untag this from the working group agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Then let's tag the back if needed. Next issue is option to run V8 test suite, issue number 199. I believe Michael should be able to report progress on this one.
Yeah, that's basically, I think there was just one more comment before we can get that PR merged. And I have the initial job running. It does take about 33 minutes, so I don't think we're going to be able to run it as part of the regression test itself, but I think it'll be useful to have available for when people are making V8 tests, and we may want to run it, say, like once a night to keep the lookout for regressions. I don't know how often we make V8 specific changes, so we should probably choose that interval based on that.
So whenever we make a V8 update, we can make this a requirement.
Yeah.
Other than that, V8 is not going to change unless there's a floating patch.
Exactly.
So we definitely don't need to run it for every change, but we can probably add it to the collaborators guide and the onboarding so that people know about this job and they remember to run it when they change V8.
And there is one failure, so I opened an issue for that failure.
And it doesn't run on Windows, correct?
Right now it runs on, I've just set it up for x86. I don't think the PR doesn't cover doing it on Windows. So that'll be some extra work. The next step I'd see is, once we have it in and it's running on x86, I'll look to expand it to some of the other Linuxes. And then, if we got somebody who can look at the Windows side, that would be good too.
Yes, sure. Well, that's great progress. So I guess we'll continue looking for updates for this on GitHub.
Yeah, on that front, just to confirm, it requires SVN. So unless there's any objections in this group, I'll do an Ansible update to add SVN. The other question we talked about in the past is do we want to select a subset of the machines to run it on, or just let it run on any one of the existing machines?
Yeah, so I mean, the best choices would be the ones where we have more redundancy, which would be core CentOS or Ubuntu. It would also be good, if we can do more testing with regards to running it on 4 cores and perhaps testing. I think we've done a 2-core 4G machine now. So if we test it on against a 2G machine, so we know what kind of memory constraints it might have.
Right.
Because if it doesn't have any constraints, we might as well run it on the current cluster. Because if we just run it every week or every other week, I don't think spending time on it would be a problem.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so I think it probably makes sense to just add SVN to all the machines in Ansible, and then I'll specifically, target a 2-core 2 gig machine and see how it runs there.
Yeah, the tricky part with the SVN is that you'd probably have a different name for it on every platform, but other than that, you should be fine.
Oh, really? So it's not just going to be SVN?
No, and some it's SVN, some it's Subversion, and some it's like Subversion 17 and stuff like that. So it's it's with most other packages, it's very similar.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll add it more slowly then. I'll probably add it to the ones where it is SVN to start with and expand there first anyway.
Okay, great to see this moving along. Shall we keep it on the agenda?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay.
Next issue is issue 291. Make sure all init scripts has jobs and node test there.
Okay. Yeah, that's me. So the title is slightly misleading as to what I'd like to discuss, but since we created that issue, we've now merged a few key things regarding how we run tests in Node.js. First of all, we're now actually supporting running tests in parallel. We haven't deployed that just yet, but especially Rich has been doing a great job in terms of fixing all tests that had issues running in parallel. But as a result of that and a few other things, the environment variables we rely on in testing is kind of changing. So where we used to use node common pipe, we've now replaced it with node test there. We use jobs to control parallelism and such. And if we used to have a constraint as whether to where we could run this. So node 0, 10, and 12 didn't have any of these patches, which meant that we can't really run it through Jenkins because then half of the times it'll fail if we run against the other branches. So my question is that at some point, we need to do a cutoff in terms of what build environments we want to support in Jenkins. And with the upcoming 10 and 12 releases, my suggestion would be that we might use that as a cutoff point and update our environment with relying on these variables. And that makes it just so much easier for us to introduce running tests in parallel, which will save us more time running the test suite and other features. So I just wanted to have your thoughts on the matter.
So what's the impact to 10 and 12?
So the thing is, running tests in parallel, we used to rely on, when we had a problem, path max problem on some architectures when it came to where socket files were stored. So since Jenkins likes to create subfolders for workspaces and names, we used to hit path max, which was around 170 something. So what we did from a year ago, like when we worked with IOJS, was essentially have an environment variable called node common pipe, which was set to /home/iojs/ node.sock or something, which worked great when you run tests serially. But in parallel, where multiple tests rely on using a sock file, we run into issues. So what I did was land a patch where we used, because when you run the test suite in parallel, the test runner actually creates subfolders for each thread. So we now use that for storing the socket files, and then allow the runner to change the path to the temporary directory instead. So we, instead of having the entire full path to the test folder, we can now just say home iojs tests or something similar to store the temporary files. So that's kind of a breaking change. But since we use environment variables, we can kind of do fallback stuff, which is why it's working at the moment in production or in Jenkins. But this wouldn't work forward if we wanted to run tests in parallel until these patches has landed in 10.12. But that means that older releases or other branches or other pull requests that might rely on older commits will start breaking. And we've done similar changes previously, where I think especially I didn't consider that there was hundreds of pull requests out there that actually isn't rebased very often, which means that they will start breaking, and then we get a lot of fallout. So I think we just need to think about strategies for when we are able to update the jobs in Jenkins in terms of what we require or like oldest possible committer tag.
Can we run the tests in 0.x in the old way without using the parallel scheme? I mean, all the tests are not parallelized there, right? We haven't done the job to separate the sequential from the parallel, and it's probably not a great investment at this time.
Yeah, we could obviously just introduce a lot of branching, so we'd check for versioning similar to what we do in the release jobs for toolchain. But it's just like, I think a question like this starts being more generic, because, for instance, I've done a patch for the CC tests and the ESLint testing to generate tap output. But since that hasn't landed in 10 or 12 yet, we can't really have Jenkins generate tap reports for those jobs just yet. So it's just like things like this will always be kind of an issue for us in Jenkins, and I'm not sure how to best handle it, which is why I brought it up for this.
Is it because we have the one shared regression job that it's an issue? Like if we had a separate one for 10, 12, and 4, would that let us have each of them run differently? Is that part of the problem you're trying to address?
Yeah, that'd be much simpler. I mean, what we do in the job is make assumptions. We run make test CI, and make test CI has a different make file for each branch, and that would introduce problems if we just ran it assets for all branches. So that sure, we could do that, but at the same time that would increase in complexity in the CI environment. So it's just one of those trade-offs. I think it'd be good to wrap our head around.
I think in the past we said let's do the branching in the Jenkins job to prototype things quickly, right? And then once things are stable, then we can move them into the source tree.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we can have this open for a while. It's just I feel like every now and then we just introduce things like this, and it's very hard because it quickly becomes legacy and very hard to get rid of. Relying on environment variables here and there, and just for us, it's a pretty tedious task to update all the init scripts on all machines, even though we have Ansible. I'm not super keen on updating 40 init scripts automated. So it's just one of those things we either want to think longer about introducing new changes in the makefile area, or have a better purging strategy where we can get rid of legacy stuff. Oh, well, that wasn't a discussion, that was a monologue for me. I'm sorry about that, but it's just one of those things that I would prefer some input on.
Yes. maybe we need to see a clearer proposal. What are you suggesting to do in 0.10 and 0.12?
Okay. Well, I can try and put something together, like from my point of view, and then I guess you could just have opinions on that.
Okay, sounds good. So we can move on to the next one. How do we manage and share tokens tied to Jenkins and GitHub?
Yeah, so that's me again. Prior to the Jenkins security issue we had in November, we had a few tokens available through, I don't remember which GitHub account, but the problem is that essentially we can't trust Jenkins with any tokens because of people being able to do a pull request and potentially bleed this just by knowing the environment variable name and getting it instanted out. The only way to kind of avoid that is just to separate all the jobs that rely on tokens. For instance, a job I would need with the backup to reload the Jenkins configuration. Or, for instance, if we wanted to do a pull request puller that then updates the pull request with the Jenkins test run. I would just like to know if we're using a specific GitHub user with extra permissions today, and if so, how to get access to that, or if we need to streamline this better moving forward. I think Joao mentioned something in our channel just ahead of the meeting. I haven't been able to catch that. So if you guys know roughly what we're doing here, it'd be great to get that in.
Yeah, I think Joao has some ideas on how to manage the credentials. In terms of user management, I mean, we should be able to create a user that has the minimum sets of permissions that we need. Does this GitHub user need the right permissions to the repo?
No, I don't think so. It's just that user access. But we, like the infra team or whoever that should have access, also needs access to that user. So we just need to set the chain up so we can work with it.
The tokens themselves can also be restricted.
Yeah.
Right. So we have a user that we use right now that has access to the binary repo, but not to the has right access to the binary repo, but not to the node repo, right? So even if that credential was leaked, it wouldn't cause any issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's why I asked. I'm not sure how it works today.
Yeah, we kind of need to bring Joao for that one.
Okay, I'll create a new issue about it then, and I'll ping him.
Okay. So that was the last item on our agenda. Previous meeting review, I think all the issues that were on the last meeting were also on today's agenda. So I guess this is it for today. We can give you back 20 minutes unless anybody else has anything else to discuss.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, thank you for joining, guys.
Okay, bye.
Take care, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.